Welcome everyone to today's webinar on Maximize Your Penetration Testing ROI with MITRE ATT&CK Framework. I'm Sneha and I'll be your host for the insightful session. We are thrilled to have a diverse audience today. I can see security managers, I can see cybersecurity executives, penetration testers. Welcome you all. Whether you are here to refine your penetration testing strategies or to explore ways to demonstrate its value towards your stakeholders, you are at a right place. So let's invite our speaker. I'm honored to introduce our expert speaker, Mr. Akshay Aggarwal, who's Vice President of Cybersecurity Services at SDET Tech. With years of experience in cybersecurity, Akshay has been forefront for helping organizations strengthen their defenses and align their security practices with real-world threat today. Akshay will guide us through several critical aspects of penetration testing today. Without any further ado, let's dive into today's session and welcome Mr. Akshay Aggarwal. Hi, Akshay.
Thank you. Thanks, Nia. Good evening, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in. I'd like to give you all a warm welcome to my webinar on the topic Maximize Your Penetration Testing or Pen Testing Return on Investment with the MITRE ATT&CK Framework. For the unversed, people who have just joined in, my name is Akshay Aggarwal. I work as Vice President Cybersecurity Services at SDET Technologies. I've got over 12 years of experience in the cybersecurity domain. I have dabbled in multiple roles throughout my career. Started off my journey as a penetration tester, then went on to pioneer the cybersecurity practice in one of my previous organizations. I grew it to a sizable team of approximately 15 engineers in just a matter of a couple of years. I've had the good fortune of working for some of the world's largest financial companies, Fortune 500 companies, healthcare companies, edtech and e-learning companies. I am also a certified information security manager, and my specialization lies in penetration testing, red teaming, DevSecOps, and so on. So, I also double as a cybersecurity evangelist or coach from time to time. So, I like to talk all things cybersecurity. Now, that pretty much sums up who you are going to be spending your next 30 or 40 minutes with. I'll now take a minute on and speak for a minute on what SDET technology does. SDET Technology was founded in 2019 with a vision to provide pure play next generation digital assurance services. For us, trust and commitment are not just two values on paper, it reflects in the very DNA of what we do, who we are at SDET Technologies. We offer a wide range of specialized quality assurance, quality engineering, and digital engineering services, including functional automation, performance testing, data warehouse testing, security testing, of course, is one of our niche core offerings. And we have deep expertise across industries. You name it, we have it. Whether it's e-commerce, retail, e-learning, healthcare, fintech, right? Why I said cybersecurity is one of our niche core offerings is because we stand out by harnessing cutting-edge tools and the innovative methodologies. And our unique selling proposition, it lies in our ability to drive overall QA transformation through advanced testing and automation. If I were to show you what we do in the cybersecurity space, if you take a look at our cybersecurity services portfolio, our cybersecurity service offerings could easily be split into two different categories. One would be cybersecurity assurance, and another would be cybersecurity consulting. Under cybersecurity assurance, we offer vulnerability assessment, penetration testing of your web applications, mobile applications, network, internal, external penetration testing, thick client, API pen testing. As a quality assurance company, of course, we are strong advocates for shift left security testing. That is why you also see DevSecOps as a service on this slide, under which we incorporate continuous security assurance practices throughout your CI/CD. We also offer IAM assessment services as well. And under our consulting services portfolio, we offer compliance audits, compliance readiness audit assessments, risk gap assessments at an enterprise level. So what you see on your slide is the entire suite, the wide gamut of cybersecurity offerings that come under our cybersecurity services portfolio. Now, we'll move to the part where you are here for today, right? I mean, the conversation for today, MITRE ATT&CK Framework. But before we dive right into what MITRE ATT&CK Framework does, I'm sure you're here because you saw penetration testing or MITRE ATT&CK Framework keywords and it generated some interest. And rightly so, because as these have been quite the buzzwords, right? You might think with the advancements in cybersecurity solutions and with AI powered cybersecurity solutions, the digital world would be a lot safer today. But the reality is, cybercrime is an ever increasing market. You don't believe me? I mean, you read the report published by bluefin.com. It is expected to reach USD 10.5 trillion, 10.5 trillion US dollars by 2025, within just a year from today. Verizon reported a staggering over 10,000 confirmed data breaches, well, to be precise, 10,626 data breaches in their 2024 data breach investigation report. Now, the pen tester or the cybersecurity professional in me asks this question: could it all have been avoided with the regular continuous pen test? Well, to a large extent, to a broad extent, yes. Every organization today, regardless of its scale or size, needs a regular pen test. Today, more than ever, especially if you're dealing with compliance issues where penetration testing becomes like a must requirement, right? For you to achieve any compliance, be it your SOC 2s or IS 27001s or PCI DSS or GDPR. But at the same time, you have your C suites, your executives asking you, what is the real value that's coming out of those pen tests? They want to see performance indicators. They want to see that the security controls that you have put in place, they're not just working on paper, but they are actually working efficiently. Now, is it really possible to avoid data breaches through standard pen test methodology? Well, I'm afraid not. Penetration testing methodologies have become highly standardized. Even if you use multiple vendors or you rotate vendors, which has now become a standard practice, I deal with a lot of companies on a day-to-day basis. You'll probably gonna see same results. You'll see a lot of the same findings. The ones you're able to mitigate or remediate, you fix them, you remediate. And you justify the rest by putting in compensating controls in order to provide the level of confidence to your customers that those controls are protecting the sensitive data in your organization. And I believe you're here because you're really not happy with that same checkbox exercise every year, by seeing the same results every year. So, how can you get more return on investment from those pen tests such that you not only move away from the checkbox mentality and provide real value to the executives, but at the same time provide confidence to the entire organization? We at SDET Technology believe that leveraging MITRE ATT&CK Framework in your pen test methodology can really help you achieve that goal. And you'll understand how and why, in as we go along. The MITRE ATT&CK Framework, it can help you perform testing specific to your risk while measuring your security posture. This allows you to stay laser focused on the threats and the risks that your company has been sitting on. And you use that to actually affect the penetration test and get the results you have been looking for all along. We'll take a look at the MITRE ATT&CK Framework in detail in the upcoming slides. But for now, let's just take a few steps back and understand why I said penetration testing has become standardized. Now, if you look at the slide, on this typical pen test methodology, and this is even laid out by the NIST, it starts with planning where you scope out your target of evaluation, be it your external, internal, or web app, or mobile application, or cloud, whatever it might be. Then you try and quantify the target of evaluation, right? You look at you try and identify the number of public facing IP addresses, web applications, number of websites, and so on. And you also, once you have consensus from your customer on the extent of your test or pen test, and once that information is settled on, you then move to the reconnaissance phase, where the pen testers use open source intelligence to first perform passive reconnaissance. You look at the information that is publicly available without actually having to interact with the target. Then you gather all of that information, put it together, and map out the attack surface. And from that point onward, you go about performing active reconnaissance, where you now interact with the target, the IP addresses, or the web applications that I pointed out. You want to discover, you want to see if there are any open ports on the services, right? What type of web frameworks are in use, what kind of APIs are in use, and so on. And then you map out pretty thoroughly the attack surface. And with all of that information in place, you begin to perform vulnerability scanning using, you could use open source scanners or commercial scanners or a mix of both. You try to identify as many vulnerabilities as possible in the resources you have discovered. And then you look to exploit some or all of those vulnerabilities with known exploits. The intent pretty much always is to gain access to the internal system anyhow. And then you begin to map out the internal network attack surface, the subnets, all of it. I mean, this is like a whole different exercise. And you commence the reconnaissance process all over again. You now try to identify what are the different systems, IP addresses, servers, and so on. And once you have gathered all that information, you begin another vulnerability detection phase. You use different attack vectors and exploits, and you continue down that path until you have either exhausted the budget of your pen test, or you have tested out all of your test scenarios. And all that information then goes into a comprehensive, detailed technical report. So let's take a moment to look at what constitutes a penetration test report that we provide to our customers. Our penetration test report contains 3 sections broadly categorized as executive summary, attack narrative, and detailed technical findings. Well, in the executive summary section, you try and give the high-level information of the threats as concisely as you can, their impact, how those those vulnerabilities or security issues could be remediated. You also give the number of threats and their severity levels as well upfront. You also give an insight into the high-level risk score against a compliance or a standard. Let's say, you used OWASP, right? If it was a web application pen test, you list down the vulnerabilities against the OWASP top 10. And we typically grade or rank these vulnerabilities based on CVSS, which stands for Common Vulnerability Scoring System. And then you give them, you rank down those vulnerabilities against the OWASP standard, and you then give them a rating of safe, unsafe, and through that you come up with a health score for your web application in question. So that's pretty much what you put in the what you put into the executive summary section. Now, when you move to the attack narrative, on this front, you walk your customers through how you perform the reconnaissance, how you perform vulnerability scanning, how you got into exactly which system you began to attack first, right? What were the openings you were able to discover? How you used those openings, your open ports, to exploit and gain further access into your systems? How you were able to gain access into a single host and dump all of the passwords that were on that host. The idea is to gain access to or become a domain administrator. So systems that do not have single sign-on turned on and so on, you pretty much you walk them through a narrative that just really tells the story of your attack. And in the third section, the detailed technical findings section, lastly, as you have exploited, you will have findings that come from you identified end of life softwares, or you identified unprotected LSAS, different issues and concerns that the company, your customer, needs to start looking at remediating. And in those findings, you try to provide as much more detailed level here that you could pass these findings off to a technical expert or a developer, who could use this information to then mitigate and resolve those particular issues that were discovered. So that's kind of the idea of a pen test and what's involved in both scoping out and performing, and then providing the report that you are going to then use over the next months or years to mitigate and resolve your findings. Oftentimes, what we do is after you have identified you're done with the first round of testing, you then give your customers a few weeks. It could be ranging from 4 weeks to 6 weeks to 8 weeks, and after a decent gestation period, they come back to us, and then we retest. We provide a free round of retest to our customers, and then we update the report basis how many vulnerabilities we found fixed and so on, and if there were any new vulnerabilities that we found open in the environment. So that's pretty much what a typical pen test report looks like. And this is where these findings, right? I mean, so this is kind of and it was an intro to penetration testing, the kind of process that we follow, right? Now, I want to take a minute here about opportunistic versus prescriptive pen testing. Now you must wonder what is the difference. Right? Most pen testing that we do today fundamentally falls into the opportunistic testing side. And what it means is whether it's a gray box or a black box or even a white box test, very often our customers provide the scope. And then, as I described in the methodology section, our pen testers will go out and use the reconnaissance tools to find out what they can find, look for opportunities like an open remote desktop protocol port typically, and then you go ahead and confirm that really it is the protocol that is running on that port. If it is, then you look for avenues to perform brute force attacks, a password guessing attack. Basically, pen testers are only looking for opportunities, what they can find, what they can discover on their own, that can actually open the door for them to perform further tests, gain domain admin access, and so on. So let's take an example of an internal pen test for a client who processes credit card data, right? They would have segmented their CDE network from the rest of the corporate network, and firewalls would be blocking the traffic between the two. And in that case, you have to now use special tools like VPNs in order to gain access into the cardholder data environment. So you start your test with a laptop inside of the corporate environment, and while you are in the corporate environment, you then begin to work through the network there, looking for any kind of opportunity that might allow you to attack over into the CDE, the cardholder data environment. And while we are doing that, we are going to identify, in that process, you may come across, identify uh, end of life softwares. You may end up finding legacy broadcast protocols. You may find systems that are unpatched, that are vulnerable to specific exploits that you can use to your advantage to do a privilege escalation. And eventually, you try to become the domain admin on the corporate network. And now that you are the domain admin on the corporate network, you then begin to take over people's system. You put all these security risks in the report, these issues, addressing the needs, and the issues that you found inside the corporate network. Now, you go take this report to your customer, and while I mean the client may appreciate you for the great job done, but at the same time, they might also say that, hey, because I've been in this situation, a lot more than once, they might say that, hey, we are only concerned about the compliance issues. And at that point, you think that I wish I would have known more about what the specific threats you see to their environment. Because, see, as pen testers, if we knew those threats, or, we could have been more prescriptive in our testing, we could have identified specific tests that directly address the concerns that a customer may have for their risk or for their business strategies. So knowing those would allow you as pen testers to be much more laser focused, as I said earlier. So in the case of prescriptive testing, you could have said that, hey, our MDR, or our SIM or our XDR identified the path that the attacker took, and as a pen tester, you will now leverage that information. It would now enable you to exploit it further. You start with an opportunistic, right? Of course, because that's where you start. So I'm not saying that all your testing has to be prescriptive, but it has to be an amalgamation of two: opportunistic penetration testing plus prescriptive penetration testing. So, I mean, let's say, so that your customer can actually give you an account and say that, hey, I mean, now that you're done with opportunistic testing, you take this account, and I'd now like you for you to be specifically try to attack this and see if you can get to it. So you have combined opportunistic and prescriptive testing to gain more value from the pen test, something that is a little more more specific to what your needs are. Hope that helps you understand the difference between opportunistic and prescriptive penetration testing. Now, about the type of pen testing, the different kind of pen testing we do. When we perform a web application pen test, we typically stick to the OS top 10. And then, of course, opportunistic things we try to exploit. Like we can, I mean, we'll go above and beyond the OS top 10. We'll upload files. We'll see if we can upload a file that might have malicious content. while it is not part of OS top 10, it is still a vulnerability that you try to exploit more commonly. But typically, you stick to the OS top 10 web application. And if you're looking at mobile applications, of course, there is a similar standard, the OS top 10 list for mobile applications as well. So it's pretty much the same thing, but if your penetration testers are not following these checklists, then I would encourage you to make sure that you ask them to look at these standards, because this is a quite a comprehensive list of the common web threats or the mobile threats. Now, the part where rubber hits the road, right? What is MITRE? Well, the MITRE ATT&CK Framework is a curated knowledge. It is a curated knowledge base and model for cyber adversary behavior, right? It reflects the various phases of an adversary's attack lifecycle and the platforms that they are known to usually target. Attack in the MITRE ATT&CK framework stands for adversarial tactics, techniques, and common knowledge. And it is a free framework, right? You can just go to their website and download it and share it with the team. And it is used by both your red teams and your blue teams, right? Red teamers for to build out their attack narrative and to find and go down the same path as an attacker would, and for the defenders, right, the blue teamers, to put in the security controls and to build guardrails around it. So MITRE ATT&CK, like I said, it is a cornerstone framework that comprehensively understands cyber adversary tactics and techniques, and it originates from the MITRE Corporation. This is a globally recognized knowledge base, and it is an invaluable tool for cybersecurity professionals, which cybersecurity professionals like myself who aim to fortify their defenses against sophisticated cyber threats. Now, I don't know if before we actually go down and look at the demo of what this framework provides, we'll just try and understand the origins of MITRE framework, right? I don't know if you're familiar with this, but a few years back, this idea of a cyber kill chain came out. It was developed by Lockheed Martin, and it kind of has the same idea as of the military would use in an active campaign. So if you were to think about, if you're going to protect maybe an army base, right? That for an enemy to gain access to the base, they are going to have to go through a specific series of processes, steps that they'll have to take to perform. They'll first have to perform reconnaissance, right? They're going to have to identify your geolocation of the base. They are going to have to again map out a path to get to that base. And as they laid out the path, once you have that information as army, right, you can identify what the attacker, how the attacker will get to the base, and then you can deploy countermeasures all along that path and all along those different steps that the attacker has to take. So by identifying the kill chain, the attacker must take, you can better protect your military campaigns. Lockheed Martin, he took that same idea and he applied it to cybersecurity and called it the cyber kill chain. And just as I talked about that in the pen test, the first thing an attacker does is perform reconnaissance as they identify the tools and the versions of software and everything that that customer may have. They may identify what antiviruses you use, right? They will go look at different forums on the net. They'll try and identify and dig out as much information as possible. Let's say you post about you put out a job post looking for people who have experience with tools like Sentinel or CrowdStrike. So now they with this information they will easily identify that you probably have CrowdStrike in your environment. So then they'll purchase that tool, put it in an environment, test it, and then they develop specialized scripts in order to bypass it. And then they'll figure out a way to put it in your network and exploit it. And once this software is installed in a network, then they begin to do a command and control and eventually act on their objectives to, if it was company that processes credit card holder data, so they would try to steal your credit card holder data, and they'll try to steal your intellectual property. They would try to steal human resources records that they can now sell, on dark web. So that's pretty much what attackers or adversaries, they want to do. MITRE ATT&CK Framework, it kind of follows that same concept. What they have done is, they have produced a taxonomy, right, like a database of tactics, techniques, and procedures that you commonly see in standards like OWASP, for example. Right, OWASP, it gives you the standard breach information for web applications, mobile applications. MITRE ATT&CK Framework looks at standard attack actions that attackers have taken, and it pulls that information together into a usable database, a taxonomy of tactics, techniques, and procedures. So very similar to the cyber kill chain, this MITRE ATT&CK Framework, it looks at things like reconnaissance, resource development, the initial access, execution, right? How the adversary or the attacker is going to gain persistence, how the attacker will use command and control, and eventually how the attacker is going to perform exfiltration, and then lastly impact, right? So again, it is very similar to the cyber kill chain, but in this case you're actually looking at specific tactics, techniques, and the TDPs, right, that an attacker might use for each one of these stages. So this becomes extremely useful if you can identify, what are common tactics, techniques, and procedures. You can then begin to put in place controls and countermeasures to specifically address those tactics and techniques. So again, if your company deals with healthcare information or has cardholder data, so you would then segment off your the CDE environment. Then you'll be able to be much more specific as to that risk and the threats that your that your company may potentially face, right? With MITRE ATT&CK Framework, you could say that, hey, in the current environment, these are specific attackers who are going after the healthcare information. And when those attackers go after the healthcare information, they typically follow these, tactics and techniques and procedures. So now you have that information. You, as a pen tester, you may want to use that information and see what that attacker will commonly do in the healthcare industry. So you are able to then plan out, chalk out, as a company, you can chalk out and put in safeguards around those standard processes. So the MITRE ATT&CK Framework not only gives you the knowledge base of tactics, techniques, and procedures, but it also customizes it based off of known threat actors and the way that they have performed their activities. Using the MITRE ATT&CK Framework, you can prescribe TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures that you would like your security team or your security testing team to measure this, right? I mean, you can, if you have an internal security testing team or your IT security, you can use it to actually measure it, the ability of an external penetration testing vendor, how they attack, right? This puts you in a position to ask questions like, hey, did your security team actually detect and respond appropriately to the attacks as the pen tester performed them? So if a pen tester is not performing or leveraging these TTPs, then you really can't detect, and you can't just help but look at what they did on their own, more like opportunistic testing. So this is where MITRE framework, the MITRE ATT&CK Framework, kind of bridge the gap between a true red team and a true pen test, and it allows you to be more prescriptive. It helps you provide actual measurable insights into how your team performed at detecting the cyber incidents, and how well they responded to it. The red teaming is always more suitable for large enterprises with rather mature security posture, where you're asked to assume the identity of a threat actor, and then you're told to emulate their attacks techniques to see if you can be detected. So it is not only kind of expensive, but rather suited for big enterprises. Whereas smaller companies, they can look to performance testing, penetration testing. They can look to perform penetration testing. But with MITRE framework, once you have, integrated MITRE framework in your pen test methodology, you can even be, you can get a little more precise and gain more actionable information from such pen tests. So that's pretty much the idea of incorporating and leveraging MITRE framework as you go about performing pen tests. Now, if you go to the MITRE website, you will see different matrices. MITRE has multiple matrices, one each for enterprise. And under enterprise, you have a pre-matrix, which is very helpful during the pre-attack phase. It has tactics and techniques that represent MITRE attack, a matrix for enterprise, covering preparatory techniques. Depending on your target, if it's Windows system, you can find a matrix that contains information for the Windows platform. Similarly, you can find one for Mac OS, Linux, cloud, network, containers, right? I mean, it has different matrices for different target systems. And if you look at these headings here, the reconnaissance, resource development, initial access, execution, and so on. These are all the tactics that an adversary may employ during the attack. So when you get to a tactic, we can specifically dig into different techniques. You will find that it provides you with mitigation recommendations as well as detection methods as well. MITRE ATT&CK Framework, since it has grown, it has since, and they have also put together a couple of other additional sites, that are used aside the defender site, right, which is actively used by the blue teams in organizations. And these sites do a good job of really taking in detail the defense mechanisms as well. I think it will all be better understood if I actually showed you how you can map out a CVE to MITRE ATT&CK Framework, right? CVE, it stands for Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures. And CVE, again, is a glossary that classifies vulnerabilities. And this glossary analyzes vulnerabilities, and then it uses the common vulnerability scoring system to evaluate the threat level of a vulnerability. It is a database of publicly disclosed information security issues. CVE number uniquely identifies one vulnerability from the list. And the example that we are going to look at today is a remote code execution vulnerability in one of the Microsoft products. The number is CVE 2023-36884. It was, like I said, in Microsoft Office. And we'll try and map out this CVE with MITRE ATT&CK Framework and see how we can use the TTP to better our pen test process and derive a really nice mitigation strategy. So I'm going to switch over to the demo now. I'll just pull it up. I'll just play it on the full screen so that you can make out what's happening. Right, so this is the attack.mitre.org website, and on this you will find, this is the attack for enterprise, and this is the attack for enterprise, and this under these matrices you have enterprise, mobile, and industrial control system matrix as well. So right? So if you're, let's say, looking for a matrix in mobile application, if you're targeting an Android iOS application, you can pull out a different matrix. And for industrial control systems, if you're dealing with actuators, sensors, SCADA devices, you can look at the ICS matrix. For this discussion, we are only going to stick to enterprise matrix. As I explained earlier, these headings that you see here, you see reconnaissance, resource development, initial access, execution. These are different stages of cyber attack, and these are also called as tactics. And under these tactics, there are techniques that are listed, right? These are techniques, and they also have the sub techniques. So the first two stages, like I told you before, they are used during pre-attack phase, where the attackers try to gather as much information as possible from the reconnaissance, tactic on the victim, and then plan the attack accordingly. Same goes for resource development. Then you try to develop the resources, based on the information that is gathered on how to conduct an attack. So what tools they need. So this is more of a pre-attack stage, and then when you so reconnaissance and resource development. So and from initial access up to impact, right, which is the last stage. So we'll discuss how it plays out. We'll go to the attack navigator section. This is the website using which you can map out the CV or the vulnerability to this framework. We will create a new layer. We'll choose enterprise, but as I said before, if vulnerability is for mobile or ICS industry, then you can choose that accordingly. Since this vulnerability affected the enterprise application, I have selected enterprise here. It is a remote code execution vulnerability. And you may now want to give a description of your choice. Let's just call it the same name, CV 2023 6884. Now, for you to understand adversary behavior, how the attack, what transpired, how the attack was played out, you have to do some research. Right? During my research, I came across this article that was published by Microsoft. You can use various research blogs that are available out there, and based on that, you can study first what the attack is, what application it is affecting, and what the attack vector was. Is it remote code execution like exploitable over the network? Or does it need local execution? In which case, then the attack vector would be different. The attack vector type could also be different. So here, if you see this, based on this block, it says that it is remotely exploitable, and then the privilege required here are none. So based on this, phishing information and some other articles that I studied during my research, I've come to a conclusion that the initial access vector in this case would be phishing. So we will just populate here under initial access. We'll go to the tactic, we'll populate the technique phishing. You can select the technique, and once it is selected, you can then color it with a choice of your color. And now that you've got an understanding that, okay, since taking this vulnerability, right, since this is affecting the Office and Windows application, user interaction is required. And as I said, reading other blogs, I've come to understand that phishing is the initial attack vector, right? It is a technique that the attackers used to exploit this vulnerability. So that is the reason I've chosen phishing here. Other techniques which are listed under this tactic, like drive by compromise, exploit public-facing application, these are not applicable here because this is only for this specific to Microsoft Office, and it requires user execution. Because this is what the information that is given by Microsoft. So the user interaction is required. It says here successful exploitation requires a user to take some action. So based on that, you can understand that user execution is required, or user is required to take some action. So when a phishing mail is delivered to the user, maybe as a phishing file attachment will be delivered, or some link will be delivered in the email, and then attacker will employ some social engineering message which will lure the user to click on the file or image or link. And that is how then the attacker will look to execute the payload and on the system. So you can highlight this as well by selecting here, and then by again choosing a color of your choice, you can select it. You can select all these three sub techniques under persistence. If you see here, I have another blog again. So if you go to that blog, right, you see another blog, Cyber Angel, which was published by Cyber Angel. I could see in the end that the persistence is maintained, right? And sorry, it was not maintained, and then the execution, the discovery, what all will be used. So using this information also, you can go ahead and you can right, again see our discovery. So you go back to the framework and then you populate here. So since there was already a research blog published on this CV, then I think it was in a way easy for me to populate this matrix. I think I was kind of lucky that there were multiple blogs available for me to do research on this particular CV. So right, if you search this option, it will highlight the techniques that was used in the attack, and then you can select. You can you can see that. Let me search it again, and you can say select all. And when you say select all will get selected under system discovery here. Let me just see. Yes, it is selected here under system discovery. So if you see virtualization and this is selected, so once both of these are selected, you can then highlight it again, the color of your choice. So in a similar way, you can populate this framework, and once this mitigation framework is populated, then it becomes very easy for you to understand this thread, and it becomes very easy for you to understand the different techniques that will be employed during the different stages of the cyber attack, and then accordingly you can go ahead and you can decide what should be your mitigation strategy. So I've populated the framework based on the blog and the research that I did. Right here it is. So now you understand that phishing is the initial door through which the attacker entered, and then he would have had some message for the user which lured the user to click on the link of the file that the attacker is sent with the phishing email. And once that link is clicked, it will create a bid store, right? That is background intelligence transfer that is used mostly in the updates. So it created the schedule job, and then further in the, if you see privilege escalation, right? So if you see privilege escalation, this is not highlighted here. If I refer to the Microsoft blog again, it says privilege required is none. That means no admin privilege are required, or there is no need for the privilege escalation, privilege elevation, my bad. That the attacker is unauthorized prior to the attack, therefore does not require any access to the files to carry out this attack. So there is no privilege escalation needed in this case, and that is the reason then here in the MITRE ATT&CK framework, I did not choose any. And then on the defense evasion, you have populated indicator removal. And if you expand this sub technique, you will come to know that the attacker tried to clear some event logs, and he tried to avoid defenses from your endpoint, uh, from your endpoint security control software or firewall, and all those under discovery information here, you could have highlighted these techniques and what all the adversary tried to discover. You send the information back and how it tries to move in the later movement. You can understand how it will try to move within the network under command and control, and you can understand what protocols will be used to take the command from the command and control server. So accordingly, then you can choose to monitor these protocols. Since the initial access door is going to be phishing, you can plan your mitigation strategy, and you can work on strengthening your email gateway filtering rules, which can match, and then you drop the emails that are going to be related to this attack. You can sense it is based on user interaction. It relies on user interaction. You can maybe send out an email notification, a mass email notification to your entire organization users, making them aware about such and such attack in the wild, and then asking them to be, more vigilant when they are trying to open some attachments from the emails or trying to click any link on the emails for phishing. You can even deploy some anti-phishing tools which can be used to train the users. You can develop cybersecurity awareness trainings. So, under the impact, here that this malware, you can understand what the malware was trying to do. I mean, it is encrypting your data, trying to trigger a ransomware like situation. So in this case, for your business continuity plan, data backup becomes very, very important. So this is how you will go out and you will plan your mitigation strategy, your business continuity strategy, and then what you can do is you can download this framework, right? Populate it, download the populated framework, and then it gives you an option here to download the framework in the form of a JSON file. This you can share it with your team so that when they are on this website, they can simply choose to click here, open existing layer, they can click here to open from local, and then they can simply choose the JSON file, and then they'll be able to see what you have populated. So, this helps you build your sort of threat library as well, as you can store this JSON file in your threat library. So I hope this was helpful, and you can now relate how you can leverage MITRE ATT&CK framework in your penetration testing methodology. So I am going to again switch back to the presentation mode. And we'll switch on the camera too. All right. So now, now I think that demo gave you an understanding of how you can build out your penetration testing attack narratives, how you can make MITRE ATT&CK framework a part of your attack narrative. So you can, actually walk them through MITRE ATT&CK chain to perform and to discover the findings, so that this becomes very useful to you as you provide information to your company, or to your customers, or to your board, or to whoever who's actually going to care, to know how protected your company is, your customers are. You can use this to evaluate different pen test vendors also. Take last year's pen test and look at these techniques. And I see, there are a bunch of techniques that want, you pick a pen test report from last year and you look at it from an angle that, hey, I see a lot of techniques here that weren't specifically used in last year's pen test. So this year, I would like to ask, the pen testing team, uh, to include some of these tests, right? You can be more prescriptive, and you'll ask them to add it to the pen test this year, so that you take advantage of knowing that threat actors do go a certain way, right? If they go after a particular industry using these techniques to specifically see how protected this company is, you can, of course, follow those same techniques. So I think this is where you can actually benefit from the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Hopefully, I hope you were able to see the connection and perhaps use MITRE framework to enhance your penetration testing methodologies. So I'll just sum up the entire webinar. So we talked about how, so far, what a general pen test looks like. We talked about the overview of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And now we also saw a demo of how you can actually, put it to work. You can work through MITRE ATT&CK framework, build it, share it with your, red teams, blue team. and look at how you can uh, use this framework to identify particular adversary behavior for your industry. What are the tactics, techniques, and procedures or processes that the adversary would use when they are, attacking your industry. And then we were also able to drill into those TTPs and determine which ones would be really specific to your company that you might have a need for. So that's pretty much what we wanted to cover as part of this webinar. Hope it was helpful, and you will be able to now upskill or your penetration testing strategy, or you'll be more vigilant and more prescriptive in your external pen test when you go contract a new vendor. Or so that's all we want to convey through this webinar. Thank you so much, and we can now take questions if any. But before that, these are some of the resources that I used, read, research during while I was prepping up for this webinar. Interesting resources for you also to look at as well. If you want to see this deck, I mean, just send us your requirement in the chat box, and we'll be more than happy to email it to you. So thank you. Back to you, Sneha.
Thank you so much, Akshay. It was a great, insightful, and comprehensive presentation you have given. I hope everyone here have gained valuable knowledge on how to better leverage the MITRE ATT&CK framework to maximize their penetration testing ROI. I think so. While you were, discussing all these important elements, I got few comments. Having few questions, so I just picked few. I hope people understand that I won't be able to take all of the questions, but I'm just taking few of them, and will be giving the responses to all the questions via email. But for now, let's take few. One question I've received is, what makes more sense for a small organization like ours, white box, gray box, or complete black box testing if it is not a standard practice in our organization? So, Akshay, what do you say on this?
Right. So thank you for the question, Sneha. So I think for a smaller organization, right? I mean, if it's not a standard practice and you don't do it regularly, or you don't have the continuous security testing practice in place. So I think if you're going to contract a penetration testing vendor, I think it would make sense for you to ask them to do a white box testing, because see, black box testing, of course, I mean, everything has a place in this industry, right? Black box, gray box, white box. But for you to attain that level of security posture, for you to I mean, it's a process that you got to take, right? I mean, you got to attain a certain level of security posture for you to then say that, hey, I mean, our security posture remains rather mature, so we would like you to just come in, assume the role of an adversary, and then just perform black box. But I mean, if you're if it's in its infancy, pen testing, at your organization, then it makes more sense for you to, give all kinds of accesses to the pen tester, so that you have correct insight, visibility into your, the entire attack surface. So I hope that answers your question. So I think for a smaller organization that doesn't have, or that doesn't do penetration testing regularly, if you're in the process of rotating your vendor, or if you're going through your annual penetration testing exercise, it makes sense for you to invest in a white box pen testing. Thank
Perfect,
you.
perfect. Yeah, I hope the question have been answered here. I have one more question. That is, how can you use this MITRE ATT&CK framework to put in defense, and can it be used by blue team as well?
Good question again. So, like I said, MITRE has evolved since, I mean, they came out with this framework. So it's not only used by the red teamers or the penetration testers, right? I mean, if you drill down into the techniques, you'll be able to see that how you can detect these threats, how you can mitigate those threats. So I think you will have to go to the website, the MITRE website, try and map out, pick any CV for that matter. You could go. and look at I'll share the recording also. You can go see how we mapped out the attack narrative with the MITRE ATT&CK Framework. So you can drill down into the techniques, and then for you to come up with mitigation strategies. Of course, MITRE. There is also a website again from MITRE, which is MITRE Defend. There you would find detailed level information on each of these techniques and how you can remediate. So that is where, I mean, it has all the resources are available on the MITRE website, so you should be able to the blue team can benefit immensely, from the resources from this Defend website. You can go look at a particular technique and then drill down into how you can remediate it, what are the mitigation strategies, how you can discover it firsthand. So I
Got
hope
it.
that answers your question.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, I guess. So, yeah, I'm gonna take one more question and think because it's already a lot of people over here, and we are not gonna take much of their time. So, just the one last question. It is, if we are hosted on cloud, do we still need to regular pen testing? Isn't the cloud vendor already taking care of it? I think it's a good question. Yeah.
It is, it is. So in fact, I also read I wrote one article and I published it on LinkedIn. Right? It all depends on your engagement with the service provider, the cloud service provider, right? If you're using it as an infrastructure as a service, or if you're using it as a platform as a service, or just software as a service, right? So depending on as your engagement changes, of course, I mean, if you're using SaaS, I mean, if you're using it in the SaaS mode, then of course, security of the infrastructure is the cloud service provider's responsibility. But data, you got to protect it. I mean, if you're using it as a platform as a service, you have to protect your application. They are not going to perform penetration testing on your application. You have to understand that these resources are shared. So on these cloud service providers. So that's what I mean. I mean, you have to identify the kind of engagement you have, the resources that you need to protect, but the security of the application and the data that it contains. I mean, it is your responsibility, not the vendors. So I hope that clarifies it.
Right, right, right. I understand. Yeah, I think thank you for all your engaging questions. I hope this discussion has provided clarity and actionable insights that you can implement in your cybersecurity strategies. And as we conclude, I would like to remind everybody that recording of this webinar will be made live in some time on our social media pages. So, along with that, lastly, I just want to give a big thank to you, Akshay, for sharing your expertise with us today. Thank you so much, and it was a very insightful, webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Sneha.
Thank you, thank you. Now,
Bye for now.
yeah. So I think we had a great evening today and the morning for people those who are joining us from different time zones. Have a great day, everyone, and stay secure. Thank you.